The woman enters the forest beside the stream with a measured, careful pace. She is not looking for the prettiest spot. She is looking for ground strong enough to start from nothing and raise a real shelter. Once the location is chosen, she begins clearing the ground and opening space for the whole build. The first actions look simple, but this stage determines whether the shelter will later feel stable, clean, and practical to construct. Long bamboo poles are dragged in, sorted into working order, and cut down toward the lengths she will need. Quick science note, bamboo is hollow inside, but its segmented nodes help it stay light while still handling force well. That strong strength-to-weight ratio is one reason bamboo works so efficiently for shelter building in damp forest environments. The moment the material starts lying in deliberate rows on the ground, the viewer can feel the story shifting from preparation into construction. She crouches low to trim the bamboo ends, clean the nodes, and correct uneven sections, so later joints will sit more tightly. The work is quiet on screen, yet it is exactly what makes the frame later look straight, clean, and trustworthy. As the first bamboo members are lined up and start locking into place, the foundation of the story becomes clear. This shelter is not being built from impulse, it is being assembled through measured spacing and carefully prepared details. The first upright posts appear, giving the once empty ground height, direction, and structural boundaries. In only a short span, the site stops looking like a pile of material in the forest and starts feeling like the opening stage of a real build. In the next stretch, the pace rises as she begins feeding larger bamboo pieces into the deck and support frame. Every lift, turn, and placement shows that the structure has moved beyond experimentation and into real load-bearing construction. The deck begins to appear through bamboo pieces laid more tightly, more firmly, and with a clear purpose. This is a crucial turning point because once the floor exists, the viewer can instantly sense the true scale of the shelter and the seriousness of the work. She steps onto the newly finished deck to raise taller posts, and the structure begins to lift above ground level. From this point, the shelter is no longer a simple platform. It has vertical presence and is moving toward the shape of a place that can truly protect. The upper crossbeams are connected piece by piece, creating the first clear outline of the roof. It is a strong visual milestone because for the first time, the viewer can see a high ceiling line, 4 structural edges, and the suggestion of an enclosed space overhead. The roof frame grows denser as she adds smaller members to spread weight and create support for the covering to come. Those parallel bamboo lines overhead make the build look far more organized and signal that the protective layer will arrive soon. Before moving on to the covering layer, she still takes time to correct alignment, check the joints, and keep the workflow steady. That patience makes the video feel authentic because the shelter is being completed not through speed, but through controlled, deliberate decisions. In the next phase, broad leaves are carried into the frame, and the natural green material changes the entire mood of the build. The rough skeleton begins to soften visually, as if the shelter is receiving its first skin directly from the surrounding forest. Layer by layer, the leaves are laid across the roof until the open space overhead starts to feel covered and intentional. This section holds attention well because every small action delivers a visible reward and brings the finished shelter closer. If you enjoy real, slow shelter build videos with clear progress like this, subscribe now and stay to see the finished shelter beside the stream. After the roof work, the video opens toward the water in a well-timed breathing space for the viewer. That change of rhythm keeps the story from feeling repetitive and reminds us that the shelter is being built for a specific living environment not separate from the landscape. She returns with longer bamboo pieces to add diagonal edges and side supports, making the structure steadier against wind and uneven load. After the roof, this is the stage that makes the shelter feel more mature because it now shows both protection and structural resistance. A darker protective sheet is drawn across one side of the structure, instantly changing the shelter from an open frame into something that can realistically block rain. It is a powerful visual shift because within a few movements, the viewer stops seeing only technique and starts seeing function. The closing images of the build leave the structure standing on its own long enough for the viewer to absorb the result. What began as forest ground, scattered with bamboo, has become a shelter with a roof, a deck, and a clear identity of its own. Once the heavy labor is done, the story moves into a different rhythm. A stone stove is arranged by the water and the fire begins to rise. The video does not only want to show that the shelter is finished, it wants to show that the build can now support everyday life. The main character prepares the ingredients with the same calm, tidy rhythm she used while building the shelter. That continuity makes the second half very satisfying because the viewer does not feel pushed into a different subject. It still feels like the payoff of the day's work. The food is laid onto the hot stone, and the fire with its thin smoke adds a texture that feels both ordinary and cinematic. After so many minutes of bamboo work, even the soft sizzle of the meal is enough to slow the video down in a very intentional way. She turns each piece with patience, much like the way she adjusted each bamboo member earlier in the build. That similarity between construction and cooking gives the character a clear consistency, careful, hard-working, and determined to finish every task in her own steady rhythm. When the cooked food is sliced and placed onto broad green leaves, the reward of the entire video becomes fully tangible. The presentation is simple, yet that simplicity fits the forest, the newly built shelter, and the feeling of earned satisfaction after labor. The final images hold on to the three most important parts of the story: the stream, the completed shelter, and the rest that follows a long day of work. The ending is gentle, but that gentleness is exactly what makes the result stay in the viewer's memory.